Hey, darlings. I thought I'd come on and give a few thoughts for today. Okay. Things are hotting up, aren't they? Literally and metaphorically. They seem to be hotting up. I'm in Marrakesh, so obviously things would be hotting up at the moment because it's coming to midsummer and phew, it's pretty full on here. But what I'm talking about is the world, really. And I say literally and metaphorically. I feel that many people are feeling chased by something or, you know, stuck with something and finding things challenging, even those who are doing really well in life, people that I speak to, are getting these sideways challenges, like being blindsided by certain things that were very unexpected to be blindsided by. And there's something I've been wanting to talk to the community about for quite a long time, actually. Something that I've known for a long time, and that is now coming out in more and more, I wouldn't say mainstream, but I guess different alternative channels, really, as if it's a new concept. Well, I think for most people it is new, whether they're spiritual followers, New Age followers, Buddhist followers, Christian followers, doesn't matter. There's these ideas of suffering, the idea that humanity is here to suffer on some level, and once you transcend that suffering through some kind of acceptance, that you will enter into the promised land. Uh, yes, or maybe you won't. Or maybe there isn't a promised land. Maybe this is the promised land. This idea of suffering, that you have to suffer through things in order to gain some kind of kudos and in order to learn. Now, this is the main thing I wanted to talk about. This whole idea about the soul being here to learn, to collect information for the God force, who apparently is omnipresent and omnipotent, which means that the God force is everywhere and also all knowing. So, what else is there to collect for that God force if that is the case? I really feel that people need to start thinking a bit more rationally in terms of what is being fed and what has been fed through the centuries of spiritual and religious indoctrination, basically. And there's these freedom movements out there, but it's not free because they're still spouting the same. Not everyone, right? But most are still spouting these same old paradigm, cliche things. And how many times do I hear the soul is here to learn? The soul is not here to learn. The soul, the greater part of who we are, because we're a spark of the God force, right? And for those of you who understand chakra systems and things like this, there's layers, there's dimensional layers of who we are. They're frequency layers. And beyond that is this even higher frequency, lighter frequency, that is called the higher self. Then beyond that is called something called the oversoul. And the oversoul is you. This is not beyond you and outside of you, it is within you. It's just challenging to reach these places within, or drop in is more to the point. There's places within where the higher self can really bring in the inspiration, the creativity, the peacefulness, the knowing of who you actually are, or who I am, who we all are in this unified field of consciousness. So, what is this about? I'm probably going off the subject here. What is this about? You're not here to learn, you're here to remember. Why you're learning is because we keep repeating the same patterns and mistakes. And if that learning is anything, it's a human learning in order to reclaim the soul, in order to discard all the false indoctrination, learning, conditioning, traumas, and everything else that has been perpetuated through the illusion of the ages, past lives, right? All those past lives. And you already know, you already have that remembrance within you that you are the soul, that actually you are embodying and more fully embodying the soul. So when someone comes along and say, oh, well, I needed that lesson. Well, what is that lesson? That's not a lesson for the soul. That might be a lesson from the soul, which is different. The soul already knows. The soul is already whole and bringing itself into more fullness by collecting and reintegrating all the aspects that have been splintered off itself over these crazy lifetimes in this crazy freaking false matrix. So if you're here to learn anything, it's lessons from the soul. It's not about you have to learn in order to become a greater soul or bring the information back to the divine, to the creator of all things in this non-time space reality in which the creator is. Well, I'm saying is because I'm talking in human terms, but this is so ineffable, it's not understandable. But basically, this omnipresent force of all isness already knows and is in the process of gathering back its progeny of who we are. So what happens when you say you're on this path of learning in order for your soul growth? Well, when you come into that place, this path of learning, this lie that you're here to learn so that you can evolve and grow. When you come into that paradigm, life becomes one long trail of work. Do you know how many people I hear saying, I'm working on myself, I'm working on that? Yet at the same time talking about, maybe quantum energies and things like this. Well, understand how that works, how it does work. How it works is that if you keep working on yourself, that you're telling your universal cosmos of who you are, that you have to keep working on yourself. That's how the quantum field works. It keeps mirroring it back to you. Okay, that's what it wants. That's what you want. That's what you want. Well, stop that. It's just not how it truly is. And in this world of confusion, when there's so many voices out there, and that includes mine, whether you want to listen to it or not, there's so many conflicting, contrasting belief systems being put out there, new systems that have been put out there, that it's so hard to know the truth. And there is only one truth, really. You are a soul. You need to start remembering who you are. You need to start embodying that. And the rest starts to hopefully fall in place if it's not interfered with in this false matrix. So many people are being taken off, in different directions, and myself included. I've been there, over the years of getting dragged back into things that I thought that I had completed, well, hoped that I had completed. And, they came back in different forms, but the same kind of patterning that was around them. So many people are looking for the truth, but the truth is within. That's where we find our discernment. That's where we find ourselves. And this is the challenge, especially in these times we are in, is that you're not just being bombarded by voices. You can switch those voices off, but you're being bombarded by frequencies, which are harder to switch off, but are challenging, but possible to bring yourself into a different frequency so that you're not so much interfered with. And how do you do that? by starting to listen to your higher self, to your soul, starting to embody that more, starting to take your breath, start breathing, being present with who you are in the here and now moment, by listening to that fearful ego voice who only wants to keep you safe. That's why it's there. It's part of you and me. You know, by just saying it's okay, we're okay, you're okay, life is okay. It's that. So when it comes to being here and believing that your soul is on this learning curve, it's not. It's on this circular repetition. What I get with people who come to me, and I have for many years now, are these repeated patterns, you know, whether they're ancestral, whether they're the soul experience, and in some cases, galactic consciousness or whatever. But they're repeated patterns of lessons, so to speak, because I'm speaking in that language at the moment, that have not been learned, and patterns. Why? Because they're patterns that have been repeated, repeated, repeated. What happens if patterns are repeated? If we look at the brain, what happens is we create these neural pathways. They become shortcuts to behaviors, actions, thoughts, and what have you. And these neural pathways get deeper and deeper. So that's where there's the go-to, which is why it's so important to get out of that. You know, we're here to shift the old patterns, to recognize who we are as soul, embody more of that frequency, of our own soul frequency, and remember the power that you are, the divine being that you are. So, what does that mean? It means that you are who you are, not pretending to be something else, not shutting down your voice or shutting down yourself because it's not in agreement with your community, not following everyone else's voices because you're not sure of your own. It's about who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, you know. It's about bringing it back to yourself. And it's hard. I'm not saying that this is easy. It is hard for the small mind, for the fearful self, to allow the self to drop in, you know, and trust the heart and trust the voice of the soul, to trust whole body knowing, trust. That's an interesting word, probably is a word, but not in the context that I'm using it, you know. And I'm really being called, and I have been for years now, and for the last few years especially. You know, I'm a rebel with a cause, not without a cause. And I know I can upset a lot of people when I speak what I'm speaking, because there's a vested interest in people believing it, believing that they're here to learn, believing that they're a small person, believing that when they've learned this, then they will become an, you know, an ascended being or an expanded being or whatever. You become the expanded being when you start to embody your heart, when you start to embody your heart and soul, when you start to marry that with higher mind and attuned action. And why am I saying attuned? Because attuned, as I said the other day, is different to a line. A line, we're not here to be in a line. That's the problem. We've all been living lines, linear, boxed in thinking and being, and old paradigms. We're spiral, spherical beings. You know, the energy, even when it comes down to our atomic energy, you know, the very cells in our body, the electrics go round in spirals even there. They don't run in straight lines. That's not who we are. And so the journey of remembrance is the acknowledgement and the recognition of who you are not. And you know when you're not being yourself because you'll feel constricted. You'll feel as though you're hiding something. You won't feel comfortable. There's other reasons that you could be feeling that, of course, but I'm talking about in reference to what is being spoken of here. You will know. And so it's trusting that. It's trusting that feeling and either get out of the way or just look at it. What is this that my human self is afraid of? What is it that my human self is trying to fit into? What box am I trying to fit into? What belief system am I trying to follow that is just not really me? For me, I was very blessed, way back in my 20s, when I was already a conspiracy theorist, that what's coming out now is not a surprise or news. But when I was in my 20s, way into my 30s, not my late 30s, my early 30s, I spontaneously had these past life visions, stuff like that, blah, blah, blah. It's where a lot of my abilities came from, my remembering. I started to remember who I was, who I am, should I say. I was and am. And I remember actually, I would say something or I'd have a thought, and there was another voice. It was the voice of my higher self, my soul self, that was saying, actually, do I believe that? I started questioning it spontaneously. There was a spontaneous questioning. Do I really believe that that is true? Or there would be a feeling when I said something to someone where I would actually feel, well, actually, that's not what I think anymore. That's not what I believe. That's not who I am. And that came about spontaneously. What I know is that what I have experienced, what I have remembered, and I do fall sometimes, as you all know. I'm not saying, that I don't fall. For all that I know, I don't know, right? But this came by spontaneously in order for my own soul to be telling me that this is time, it's time, wake up, wake up. In the 1980s, I was in my 20s, obviously. And I was one of the early people where people didn't talk about frequency, vibration, quantum, soul paths and things like that. They certainly didn't talk conspiracy theories. So what I'm saying is embody your soul, my darlings. It's not easy necessarily. For some, it's going to be easier than others. Start to really come into that place in allowing the soul to open within you. And if you need to symbolically go up in order to bring the higher self down, it doesn't matter. Personally, I go into a sphere that I am anyway, and I start to access those other frequency layers of who I am. Is it easy to embody that all day, every day? Not necessarily, because life happens and we're being bombarded. We are under attack. We are in a spiritual war, and it's very challenging, especially for someone like myself who's on their own all the time. I spend a lot of time, a lot of solitary time. And sometimes we need a reality check, don't we? So anyway, that's my phone messaging me for reminding me that I have something I need to do. I hope you listened to this all the way to the end. Well, I'm only going to be talking to those people who did, aren't I? It's time to remember. It's time to embody. It's time to accept yourself. It's time to nurture yourself. Put yourself first and then help others. But soul embodiment is what we're here for. You're not here to suffer on this plane. You're not here to learn yourself out of this plane as if you're, taking some kind of school examination. You're not. You already are the beings that you're trying to contact, or you are channeling, or whatever. It's time to come into the self. Okay, my darlings, I hope that helped. I'm sending you loads of love. Bye.